Welcome back, juniors. Today we're covering American women during World War II. So you do now is an image. What do you already know about it? Well, hopefully you're able to identify that this is Rosie the Riveter, okay, famous piece of propaganda artwork from World War II. It shows women making a contribution in wartime industries. And it was also aimed at empowering, encouraging women during World War II, and particularly encouraging women to support and work in wartime industries. So, what was the status of American women before World War II? Well, their lives tended to center around the home and the family. However, during World War I, many women and girls supported the war effort through factory work, through agricultural work, as you see the ladies on the bottom, farm workers. But generally, women were expected to stay at home unless if they needed the income. And worked outside of the home. But eventually there was the assumption that a woman would get married, have children, and stay home to take care of that family. So what happens when World War II breaks out? Women contribute to the home front. And why did this happen? Well, men were called away from their jobs to fight in the war. Men were drafted into the war, so they had to leave their jobs. And in order to sustain or make up for this shortcoming in male workers, women overwhelmingly will go to work to increase war production. So as you can see, there's a Rosie the Riveter on the top part of the screen. That young lady on the bottom right, Norma Jean, will later be known as Marilyn Monroe. Will also work, she did a photo shoot there, advertising, working in wartime industries. Women also supported the war effort by growing food at home, by keeping victory gardens. And women also supported the war by rationing, limiting, conserving the resources that they went out and shopped and purchased. Americans were given ration books during World War II, and those books contained a series of ration cards that you could use to exchange for goods in the market. And the idea behind rationing was to conserve goods and items at home in order to send more overseas. Perhaps with this coronavirus outbreak, we'll see rationing come back due to just the amount of panic shopping that we've been seeing, particularly with toilet paper. What is everyone doing with the toilet paper? Send me a private comment in Google Classroom. I don't understand why everyone's buying the toilet paper, but we may see rationing in our own lifetime. Let's wait and see. So beyond the home front, you've got the women working, you've got Rosie the Riveters making goods, you've got women planting victory gardens, rationing the items that they use. What about beyond the home front? Well, 350,000 women will enlist in the armed services to serve in uniform. Now, they're not going to be in combat roles, but they'll serve as office and clerical workers, truck drivers, lab technicians, radio operators. They'll test military aircraft before the male pilots fly them. And they'll work as nurses too. So there were an overwhelming amount of women that served in uniform in non-combat roles, however. What about women in propaganda? So the U.S. is going to use propaganda to encourage all citizens to support the war effort, but particularly women. Are we going to do the Rosie the Riveter exercise? Maybe not. I'll post them. You know what? I'll post them. Here we go. I forgot to edit this slide out, but I'm not going to change it now. Okay. Let's, no, not that. Let's go to the current slide. Okay, so you've got two images of Rosie the Riveter. You've got We Can Do It from 1942 and 1943. Another image there. So look at how both women are portrayed. Very different from women previously in the 20s and 30s. They're wearing work outfits. They're looking strong. The one on the left particularly looks like strong. Her body language, both body languages are strong. The one on the left has a big old rivet gun on her lap waiting to, rivet that next good. So again, we're using propaganda to target our women to get them to think, hey, you're strong, you're capable, we need you to support the war effort. Okay, so interesting how women were targeted in World War II. And then interesting, after World War II, they're going to kind of be expected to go back home. Some will not. So, also, another women's contribution, if you've ever been to the Republic Airport in Farmingdale, New York, this was the site of Republic Aviation during World War II, and they made fighter planes. During World War II. They were famous for making the Corsair, which is that picture on the bottom. And these were made primarily by women. They were known as WASPs, Women Air Force Service Pilots. They made the airplane, they tested the airplane, and they flew the airplane to the Pacific to then be picked up by the Air Force and the Navy and sent to go fight on the Pacific front. This was a dangerous job. A lot of women died in the testing. If a plane was malfunctioned or something, the women would die testing. Women worked in munitions factories, making the bullets and the bombs. That was quite dangerous too, working with gunpowder, with detonators. So these women did a lot to help supply the war effort. And the supplies that women are going to crank out over and over again will assist the men fighting in the European theater and the Pacific theaters. And there's the Corsair in action. It's a nice looking plane. And there's the Corsair again. Someone put their dog on it. I don't know why. So the war ends, and what happens to American women after the war? Many wanted to keep their factory jobs. They liked earning income. They liked being outside of the home. However, they were forced out by men returning home. Managers were just more likely to give a man returning home from the war a job than keeping the woman that they hired to do that job. What about women veterans? Well, they were blocked from taking advantage of veteran programs like the GI Bill. The mentality was that, well, they didn't see combat. However, though, they still fought, but they supported the war effort. So this was seen as a big kind of like faux pas on the side of the government that female veterans could not take part in the GI Bill too. More on the GI Bill later. So, how did American society's expectations of women change during World War II? So, as many men were sent off to war, were drafted or enlisted in the war, and as there was such a demand for new production of products for America to fight the war, women were called up and encouraged to take over those factory jobs for the duration of the war, to take up to that manpower that was needed. However, when the war ended, women were expected to give the jobs back to returning men. So you got a little bit of freedom, and then it was taken away after the war. However, the gains that women made during World War II are going to influence the second wave of feminism in the 1960s and the whole feminism movement in the 1960s, the women's liberation movement, the Equal Rights Amendment, all of that wouldn't have happened without women's contributions during World War II and the freedom and the kind of economic gains that they make. So this was kind of an important time for women. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. I will see you all on the other side. Take care.